That's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
The definition of insanity.
Hello and welcome to episode 70 of PvA Radio, the final episode of 2019. I'm your host, Luke Croft. Joining me as always, freelance gaming journalist Cody Mellicline. Cody, how are you doing, my friend?
Doing well. Eagerly anticipating the end of this garbage fire of a year.
The end of this episode.
The end of the world.
Also joining us today, Father Christmas himself, ladies and gentlemen, Larry Hunt.
That's me.
He's so jolly all the time, and he has a beard.
Yeah, it's true. When I first grew this beard, so my beard was pretty red, but when I was younger, it was very red. And my dad just gave me the hardest time. He said I looked like Kris Kringle from that Santa Claus movie where you see him as a young guy, the stop motion Christmas movies. And he married a woman named Jessica, so I guess
there you go.
I didn't know that was official lore, by the way.
That he married Jessica?
That Jessica, it is Jessica Claus. That's like official lore of Santa
canon.
Claus. It's canon. Yeah.
Well, that tells you that the Santa Claus myth is not real then, because that name wasn't invented till like the 1500s or
Last year.
First of all, there may be children listening to this fucking podcast, so why would you tell them that Santa doesn't exist?
Listen, I've told my own children that Santa doesn't exist, and they're not allowed to tell the other kids.
That's the way to go, man, so that your kids aren't lying to other kids and you're not lying to your kids. Right.
I pay good money for those presents, and I'm not going to let some imaginary fat guy take credit for
it. That's how I feel about it if I had kids. Some real fat guy's getting credit for it. So... this is PvA Radio. We get together each and every week, and each of us brings one of the biggest gaming news stories of the week to the table. Then we have an in-depth discussion about it. We have a special episode lined up for you today, though, because not only are we going to talk about the biggest gaming news stories of the week, we're going to talk to you about the biggest gaming news stories of the year, the entire year of 2019. But we'll get to that here in just a moment. We do this every week over here on twitch.tv/PvA Radio at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. And something about a collaborative audio feature article, cafe, if you will. And Larry, what do we want people to do with that? Because I got this rigmarole all off the rails.
Spam it in that emote and spell it out.
Spam it in the emote,
alphabets.
baby. Spam it in the emote.
So I did it wrong too.
What's up? If you can't catch these shenanigans live, which let's be honest, why would you want to? You can watch the next day on youtube.com/PvA Radio and on podcast services everywhere, including Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Luminary alongside our boy Conan O'Brien, who, if we had an episode next week, would have been on it, but we aren't. So
he was all lined out, and we were like, sorry, Conan, we forgot it was Christmas Eve.
Christmas Day. Next Wednesday's Christmas Day, Larry.
Dang.
You think you got more days than you do to finish up your Christmas shopping?
That's typical.
Yeah. All right.
Did you see that the official Xbox Twitter tweeted that Tim Allen had a positive KD in the Santa Claus?
No, that's awesome.
That is awesome.
He doesn't actively kill him, though, right? He just falls off the roof.
Yeah.
He scares him, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
Still positive.
Yeah.
Environmental kills count.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. All right, guys, a little bit of housekeeping here at the top. This is the final episode of 2019. See you next year, guys. Next week, Wednesday, falls on Christmas. Christmas falls on next Wednesday, so we will not be doing an episode then. But we will be
doing one now.
Some would argue we haven't for the last 70 of these. But we will be back January 1st, New Year's Day, to record the very first episode of 2020. So it's only 1 week without us, guys. Go back and listen to an episode of Conan Has Friends. Is that what it's
Conan
called?
O'Brien needs a friend.
Oh, okay.
He doesn't have them yet.
Particularly listen to the episode where he interviews Gladys Knight. So, all right, guys, let's get this week started like we get every week started with what have you been playing. Cody, let's start with you. What have you been playing?
Still playing Death Stranding. Speaking of Conan O'Brien.
Oh, yeah, he shows up.
I found him. I did find him.
Does he plug his podcast?
No.
Is he a revolutionary podcaster in Death Stranding?
No, he's not. He's just really obsessed with you.
Much like real life.
Yeah.
Does he plug Luminary? Is he like, Norman Reed, you are a true luminary in this Death Stranding age?
I'm trying to think back. I don't think so. He gives you a cool otter hat, though.
Nice.
It's like I think his wife or something is a cosplayer. Because there's still cosplayers in this post-apocalyptic world. He just tells really terrible jokes and then tries to cover up with like cringy humor. So
like
basically normal Conan. But I don't know, that game has wormed its way into my brain and I'm not sure why. Like I don't think the thing that I thought I would be constantly thinking about it, which is like the weird world building and just off the wall narrative, isn't the thing that stuck with me. It's that I really love building infrastructure. Like the thing that I'm thinking about the most is, oh, I can't wait to get the resources and plan a route to build this road. And that's in a AAA like story driven game. And that's the thing I'm most excited about. So basically, it's given me more respect for our infrastructure and the people who build it and maintain it.
Well, Cody, let me tell you about a little game called SimCity 2000. Not only can you build a city in SimCity 2000, but with the Streets of SimCity add-on, you can drive a car through it. You guys remember that?
I do.
Pretty awesome.
But can you play it? But are you Norman Reedus? And can you just get off to the side of the road and take a piss?
I'm going to be honest. We don't know who's driving the car in the Streets of SimCity.
True.
The lore has never been established. It could very well be Norman Reedus. Was he active in... When did SimCity 2000 come out? It didn't come out in 2000, did it?
I feel like I played
it. I feel like I played it earlier than that. I'll hunt that down. But also, have you realized you've worked yourself into the wrong career field then, and you want to be a city planner now?
I definitely don't, because I talk to them all the time and know what kind of a hellscape that is.
Yeah, we've all seen the first 2 seasons of Parks and Rec, and
yes,
how much that guy sucked. So
yeah,
Which,
that's one of my favorite documentaries.
Let me just say, the Parks Department in Alexandria is called the Department of Recreation, Parks, and Cultural Activities. First of all, why reverse Parks and Recreation? Second of all, I don't understand why cultural activities is under the purview of the same people who like clean up shit in parks. It doesn't really make much sense to me.
As an aside from that conversation, fuck you guys. It came out in 1993. So
wow.
Not in 2000.
Year of my birth.
Oh, Jesus. All right, moving on.
You're so old, Luke.
Well, there are some days where I forget that Cody is that much younger than us, and then there's some times where I don't realize he's that close to our age. Cody's age is an enigma.
That far.
It's an enigma. Like,
it is.
Is he 19? Is he 35? Who knows?
It's the fountain of youth, man. I found it.
You been playing anything else, Cody?
Yeah, I've been playing this game called After Party.
Ooh, how is it? Because
I'm really enjoying it.
I really, really loved
Oxenfree.
Yeah.
I actually, so far, I like it more than Oxenfree, mostly just because I love the world building, and it's like really. I mean, Oxenfree was quirky and weird in a different way, I think, but they've really like fleshed out this world of hell. The voice acting is great. The writing is great. I'm not sure why this game didn't. I mean, I've only played a little bit of it, granted, but I'm not sure why this game didn't get as much attention. Oxenfree got a decent amount of attention, and maybe it's just that it came out at the wrong time.
Because it came out October.
I think so. Yeah.
Which is a weird time. Whereas Oxenfree, I think, was like an April release or something like that.
But After Party's on Game Pass, which is why I got it, and I'm really enjoying it. I don't know if I completely agree with how they've integrated drinking into the game. Like you can take drinks and they give you different dialogue options, which granted is sort of like real life, but basically saying like this drink will give you this special ability, which I don't totally vibe with. And maybe they'll like upend that and kind of complicate it later on. But I don't know. It's a very interesting game and has a quirky sense of humor. I haven't met Satan yet, but I'm really excited to meet Satan, both in real life and in the game.
And I'm really excited to pull that clip out of context. You just made it for real life too, but
okay, so Oxenfree released in January of 2016, January 15th, 2016. After Party came out on October 29th, which is a weird time for a game like that to release right in the middle of like AAA season. So that's probably something to do with it. And again, like we come back to this all the time, but like who's sitting in the boardroom of these publishers and these developers and saying like, man, you know what would be great? Releasing a week after the new Call of Duty comes out. And I'm not saying there's a big cross section between the Call of Duty player base and the people that are playing After Party probably, but there's only so much coverage bandwidth that can be had. And late October for a game of this size, when you had so much success at the beginning of the year with your other title, makes no sense to me. Like I don't get the logic. I
don't either. The only other thing I'll say about it is, and Luke, this was in Oxenfree too, but I've seen very few other games and developers try this. Their dialogue system is super interesting to me because you can cut people off mid-sentence in a conversation, so it actually flows just more like a real conversation. Yeah, exactly. And especially when you're drunk, it makes the conversations feel a little bit more organic. I do sometimes feel like I'm missing out on the conversation, but it quickly moves on to another interesting conversation, so I don't feel like I'm missing out that much. But I'd love to see other developers try that. I think it's kind of a cool spin on the like classic adventure game formula.
Yeah, and that was the thing that like got its hooks in me instantly with Oxenfree. Was it not only was the dialogue system unique, I think that it kind of captured perfectly the way that kids that age talk to each other. You know, it wasn't like an adult distillation of youth conversation. It seemed like real conversation, which was interesting to me.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it a lot. I can't wait to finish it over break.
So Larry, how's Apex going?
Pretty great. I finally got a clip that I've been trying to get for a while. I like to watch the top Apex plays when I'm eating lunch at work. It's just what I do. Eating
lunch at work.
And there are all these hilarious
9:30 in the morning.
Only from 9:30 to 5:30. But there are all these hilarious clips where people will just like stand on a table and not move, or like just get in the corner and not move, and they just don't get noticed. And so I got a clip this week where my teammates were dead. I didn't get them revived in time. And so I just sat on a bookshelf, and this enemy team came in and occupied the room for a full minute and a half. Like they stayed in the room. They ran in and out of the room. And I got to coast into the final circle because they didn't see me just sitting on the shelf in my polar bear costume. But it's also been terrible because my left thumbstick broke on my controller. So it's been broke for a couple weeks. This generation's controllers just, I've had terrible luck with them. I've burned through them. And I've never been one to burn through controllers. I haven't broken a controller since I messed up that charge in Left 4 Dead 2 back in 2010. And I slung my red controller across the room. Learned my lesson that day. But my wife bought me this knockoff Pro controller. Very excited to take it for a spin. I just got it before I had to hop on this podcast. I don't really want to be here anymore because of that. But I can't wait to give it a try and let you know how it goes.
So if we can get this wrapped up right now, that would be great.
I've got some Apex to get to.
Yeah, the new Christmas event is pretty cool.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Talking about breaking my controller, forgot to talk about the actual game.
Yep. Yeah, man. You talk about it. You played it.
Well, look, it's already light years better than their Halloween event because you can actually play as a team in this game that requires you to play as a team in literally every other game mode that it has. So that's awesome. But essentially what you're doing is you're fighting over control of the train that's in the new map. And so it's you and 2 other squads, and you drop into the map. You have a predetermined loadout, and you try to eliminate the other team while also capturing the train, and you play it first to 3. And it's fun, but it's got flaws. It's not very fast paced. You would think with the kind of smaller section of the map to play in and the really like close objective that it'd be a really quick game mode. But if you get eliminated early, you do a lot of waiting around. But yeah, I had fun with it the night that we played, mostly because we won our very first match.
Yep, that always helps.
Then we lost our second match, and we were like, all right, we're done with this. Let's move on.
The loadout thing is really cool to me, where they have specific loadouts attached to each character, and it changes every day. So that's a nice, fun touch.
Oh, I didn't realize that because I've only played the one day. That's all I surrender of my teamfight tactics in League of Legends time. So I'm getting good at teamfight tactics, guys. I'm getting good at it, but they keep putting out patches that change what I'm doing, and I'm like, oh shit, I don't have a clue what I'm doing now. So I'm not going to bore you with my teamfight tactics talk, but I will say this. I've been playing League. Last night I played League with my brother-in-law and fed my fucking brains out on a character I've been trying out. So today I watched a video, a like 30-minute video of, hey, here's a good build for this character. Here's some tips to play. Jumped into a game, played awesome after just one video. And I was like, maybe I should do this more often. Let other people teach me how to do things rather than try to figure it out on my own. So I'm like Larry, I want to wrap this up so that I can go play some more League with all these new tips and tricks that I just learned. But all right, my New Year's resolution for gaming is to play more than just my stable of 4 games that I rotate in and out of. I've got a backlog of shit that I want to play, and I need to
definitely make this podcast a little more interesting.
At least this segment of the podcast.
Yes, at least this segment.
Yeah, I need to start playing more than one game for sure.
But will he?
Yeah.
But will he?
Tune in 2 weeks to find out.
I am going to get around to Fallen Order sooner or later. Especially, I've recently learned that they bring some interesting lore components from the original Jedi into play, and so I don't know what they are, and I don't want to just read about them. I want to live them.
I'm getting it for Christmas. I'm excited to play it.
Whoa, you're not supposed to know that, man. That's the worst thing about being an adult is you know everything you're about to get for Christmas.
There are no surprise.
No surprises. I mean, there are. They're just not good.
No.
It's like, my power bill's how much?
I have what?
That could mean a lot of things, Cody. All right, well let's jump into our show. We're not doing traditional topics this time. I want to start us off with the Game Awards, just kind of giving our thoughts on announcements. But I will caveat this to say, I don't think any of us give an actual shit about the actual awards that happen.
No.
It's more about the vibe of the show, the announcements during the show. So that's where we're going to start today. And I'm just going to kind of open it up. What jumped out to you as a whole? How much of the Game Awards did you actually consume? And what were your feelings walking away from it?
I watched the whole thing live.
We should have. I didn't realize you were doing that. We did set up a stream.
Either. I didn't know that I was. It just ended up being that my girlfriend went to bed early, so I had some time to some time to watch it. My big takeaway is that the vibe of it is a 40-year-old man fulfilling all of his dreams in front of a live audience.
Yes.
That's my takeaway.
At the expense of everybody else's enjoyment.
Exactly. Yes. I think no better representation of that is than Green Day performing live in front of people.
What did they keep saying? They kept saying, like, put your motherfucking hands up over and over again.
Stand the fuck up.
It's like, dude, it's 10:30 at night. Like, calm down.
That's my overarching impression.
In Bible college, we used to have to go to chapel at 9:00, and they would always have these student-led bands who were like, "How's everyone doing this morning?" We're like, "We had a fucking 7:30."
I played in chapel once.
Did you do that, Larry?
No.
Okay, good. We're still friends.
It was the most nerve-wracking thing ever.
I played a couple times. I never yelled at anyone. Larry, how much did you watch for the Game Awards?
I only watched bits and pieces after the fact, just clips. So I did not see the Muppet thing.
Oh my gosh!
Oh my God.
That was okay. Well, let's put some context around here.
Please.
So for anyone who's over the age of, who's under the age of 25, there is something called the Muppets, which are these puppets that have long-standing characters, and there are two called Beaker and Bunsen, who I'm sure you would recognize. But apparently one of Jeff Keighley's dreams, as he so eloquently put, is to have them present an award at the Game Awards. And so they did this bit where they developed a new game that was like Untitled Goose Game, but Beaker was the main character. But then the goose from Untitled Goose Game shows up and starts attacking Bunsen. Is that correct? I think that's correct.
Yeah, so there was the goose was outside of the game. It was also a Muppet, and then the goose was in the fake game that they made.
Yes. So all of this to present the Games for Impact Award.
Oh my God. It could have been literally any other
category, and it would have been at least somewhat better. It was still ridiculous to be like, we're gonna have the Muppets present an award. But anything else, action game of the year, but instead they chose to do it for the Games for Impact Award. And then I feel like there was a palpable discomfort with the whole thing afterwards. Yeah. And the camera goes to Jeff Keighley, and he's like, "Wow, thanks, Bunsen and Beaker. Dream come true, truly."
I felt so bad for the developers who got up to accept that award, because they had to awkwardly thank these two puppets for their super meaningful game that they've made. Oh my.
That Lord knows they spent years working on.
Yeah, exactly.
Who won? This might make it worse.
Who was it? Was it
I'm sorry.
It wasn't Don't Nod, right?
No, it wasn't Don't Nod. It was they made one of their games on Google Stadia.
Yeah.
Hold on. I'm looking it up. It was Greece. It was from Devolver Digital.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Greece.
Which, look, Devolver Digital makes us uncomfortable every single year at E3. So
yeah, but they've tried to do that.
That's true.
Did you guys see the meme of Todd Howard showing up at this Game Awards?
No.
It's like he walks out on stage. Surprise! It's me, Todd Howard. You thought you could get rid of me? Well, since you tried to cut me out, I'm putting Skyrim on your Keurigs. There's nothing better than describing a meme vocally.
Moving on.
Yeah.
A couple. I got you.
That was objectively the worst moment.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Followed closely by Green Day. Green Day's performance was not great. It seemed like it was past their bedtime. So let's just talk about some of the interesting announcements that we got, and I think there's no real better place to start than the fact that we actually got a reveal of the Xbox Series X, a name reveal and the actual product reveal, which was quite provocative. not in a sensual way, but just that it provoked a great reaction. So essentially, it looks like a wine box. Like you could pop this thing open and give it.
That's one analogy. Or a PC.
That's probably more adept.
Microsoft.
Just pop this thing open and. All right. Let me just get you guys' thoughts. First of all, just around the fact that this was here, that it was shown. I felt like this was a bit of a surprise. I didn't expect it. I didn't expect it.
Yeah, I didn't either.
So, just open floor. Your thoughts on Xbox Series X's presence at the Game Awards?
Look, I know it's a minor detail, but I love the glowy green spot on top of it.
Yes,
I miss the Xbox green glow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. I actually really like the design, and they confirmed that you can lay it on its side.
Yeah,
and it'll still be fine. So I know, because I know a lot of people were concerned about the fact that it kind of messes with a lot of current setups for like their gaming centers, because a lot of them are, at least the one I have, is designed for things to be slotted in vertically, or horizontally. But I really liked the design. The controller seems like it's pretty much the same as the Xbox One, but with a few minor changes. Like there's a share button now, which I know a lot of people like on the PlayStation controller. And Microsoft's all about kind of integrating stuff into social media and apps, so that seems perfect.
And the D-pad's a little different. The D-pad looks like it looks like an old school Sega Genesis D-pad, where it's got like the plastic bits between the north, south, east, and west points. I don't know what you call it. Yeah. It looks a little strange. It looks a little strange to me. I'm not really big on that, but the rest of the controller, totally cool with.
Yeah. And the big thing is that Microsoft had the floor to itself here.
Yes. Which
was great for them. To get like a proper, it's not, we'll learn more and more over the course of next year, but to get a proper reveal like this, without any competition from Sony, and to get out ahead of them in terms of an actual visual reveal, I think is pretty huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Sony felt like they had a little bit of like a newsworthy thing, because later in the show, I believe, maybe even the next announcement, or the one right after that, was for a game called Godfall, which was announced as the first game exclusively coming to PlayStation 5. Yes. And I feel like PlayStation probably blindsided just as much as we were by Xbox being like, well, we're going to just reveal the name and look of our new console. And they're like, wait, you can do this anywhere other than Digital Trends?
Wired, please.
Wired, sorry.
Yeah, Sony had that might be putting the cart before the horse a little bit. You want to get people excited about games. That's what will drive sales of the consoles. But you also have to have a console to be able to show.
Yeah.
They also had they had a much lengthier trailer for Ghost of Tsushima, not a gameplay trailer. There was gameplay in it. Still super excited about that game. It looks pretty rad. But yeah, Sony just didn't have as huge of a presence. And overall, I'm interested what you guys thought about the kinds of announcements and your hype for the announcements we did see, because it definitely seemed like a year before a new console generation launches, just in terms of the announcements we were getting. And part of that also might have to do with the void left by Valve pulling out of the presentation, or out of the show, relatively late in, I think, as things were being put together, which I think probably explains kind of like the just like splat landing of the final reveal of the show, which was the Fast and Furious game that looks like a PS3 game.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm scrolling through the announcements just to refresh my memory, because I watched the second half live, and I went back and watched the first half the next day. And I get what you're saying. It has the vibe of an announcement show right before a new console comes out, but it seems a little more scattered in terms of the kinds of things that were announced than other years. We got a lot of expansions talked about. We had Apex Legends, a Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 expansion,
a lot
of League of Legends talk, which was really strange. I don't think of the Game Awards as a PC kind of show. Although those experiences are coming to console as well.
I was about to say,
a lot of single player stuff.
Yeah. But then, like No More Heroes 3, 9 to 5, and then a lot of just stuff for trailers for stuff we'd already seen, like Final Fantasy VII Remake. It was strange. There was nothing that really stopped me other than the Xbox Series X that made me say, like, oh, shit, like, that's big.
Yeah, that... and the Hellblade 2, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sacrifice. Yeah. I'm excited for that. And I had no interest in the first game. And then you played it and went on and on about it. And we've talked about it several times. And so I've decided I'm going to go back, play that. And can't wait to play the next one.
That trailer was hype as fuck.
Yeah, that trailer was awesome.
Yeah. But one thing that you and I talked about the Xbox, Luke, but both of the design and the name really strongly imply that they're moving in that direction that blurs the line between PC and console.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not excited about that.
Yeah, I'm interested to see some of the feature decisions, which they talked about some, and I'll get that image pulled up so we can talk through some of them. But yeah, from a design standpoint, and there was also an interesting moment where they showed a Samsung television, like a fucking 70-inch Samsung television with an Xbox hooked up to it, and the guy was sitting as close as he would be with as a monitor and playing with a mouse and keyboard, and there's somebody that works at Microsoft that has to sign off on the representation of their product placement.
I don't think was that a Microsoft ad? I thought that was an ad for the.
No, it wasn't a Microsoft
TVs.
ad. It was for the Samsung TV. But I think he was playing on an Xbox.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
And so there's got to be somebody at Microsoft who signs off on the representation of their product when it's being placed in an ad like that, I would assume. And for them to be like, yeah, go ahead, sitting at a computer desk with your mouse and keyboard, like that's the way we want our console shown, seems also like an indication that, hey, we want more and more people to think of us as like kind of a PC gaming experience.
Who's among us has not used a 70-inch television as a computer monitor?
Hey, I'm on that Battle Stations subreddit. And there's all these guys who have like giant ass televisions with this software where they've segmented it into 4 quadrants. So it's like you have 4 separate monitors. I'm like, I could get down with that. I could definitely get down with that. You know me. I'm trying to find this image. There was an image that had like the features and some features, and one of the things they did mention was it's going, and this was not something that I think was a surprise, but they talked about it being fully backwards compatible across 3 generations of the Xbox. So that was cool to see.
That's good news.
Confirmation on that, and I can't.
The name is interesting.
Yeah, what do you guys think of that?
It's definitely. I think it's a great branding idea because it's implying the fact that this is just one iteration of what this thing is. I think there were interviews. I think Spencer or someone gave interviews afterwards saying that they're calling it Xbox. Like they're just calling it Xbox. The Series X is like, it's kind of how we think about phones, I guess, is probably a better analogy. Like the Series X is probably the X equivalent of whatever this is. And then maybe there's an S. I don't know if they're going to continue kind of denoting it as S is kind of the more entry level console, and then the X is kind of the higher end thing. I kind of like it because I think it'll kind of gives them, it embeds in the naming convention a way to kind of like be flexible with how they release this stuff, which is clearly what they're aiming towards.
And we had all those rumors early on about 3 different versions of this being released at launch, and so that may pan out still.
Yeah, because you've got like with iPhone, they have multiple versions of their phone that release at one time, like the iPhone XS, the XS Max. So yeah, I think they are moving into this more iterative stage, and I think it's going to be far more frequent even than what we saw with this generation. You know, where we got kind of that half measure of an upgrade mid generation. I think the aim will be. The aim will be to get people to think they need to upgrade every couple years. And I think at that point, I know guys like you, Larry, are reach a point where you're like, well, why shouldn't I just buy a PC if that's the direction we're moving into?
It'll depend on where they strike the balance between what that upgrade means and how much that upgrade costs.
Yeah.
Anything else with regards to the Xbox Series X here?
No, it's a big move for Microsoft. It's a big win for Microsoft.
Yeah, big win to be right out of the gates. Although I do worry a little that they've given themselves too long a runway to try to maintain momentum through. With this not being out until November, you know?
Yeah.
To start officially talking about it almost a year before we're going to see this thing come to market seems risky. But it also makes me feel like we're going to see a lot more regular kind of trickles of announcements about it rather than just a big event to reveal a bunch of stuff. Because I feel like with the Xbox One, they waited until like they were doing their big show to reveal the name and the form factor of the console itself, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So, all right. Anything else with the Game Awards that you wanted to bring attention to?
The only other thing is that I think the winner was a big surprise to a lot of people. The winner of the Game of the Year.
Oh
award.
yeah. Especially because I think anytime Death Stranding was up and didn't win was a big surprise to everybody. So
yeah, and the win, like I guess for people who didn't watch it, the winner was Sekiro, which was one of my games. It was one of my top 3 favorite games of the year, and I'm super happy that it's not award shows and stuff like this are not things that From Software usually do well in. I mean, they're usually recognized for their work, but they never really win. It's mostly just a lot of nominations. So I think it's big for that team. It's a recognition of how quality that game was on a number of levels. And I guess how many people in the industry loved it. Yeah,
and I think it's also a testimony to how big that subculture has gotten of the kinds of people who enjoy those games. Anymore. Right. It used to be very niche. But Dark Souls 3 kind of started to open Bloodborne really started to open the floodgates. Dark Souls 3 was massive, and then Sekiro was even bigger, I think, at least. So all right, well, let's move on because like I said, we don't care much about the actual awards in the Game Awards. So we're gonna move on because we got something special planned for you here to end out our episode. This will take a good chunk of time because this is our 50th episode, I think, of the year, which is pretty awesome.
Man,
patting ourselves on the back a little to say I think we missed 1 week, and then we're gonna miss this final week. So we've covered a lot of news, and the thing that we do is we cover the 3 biggest gaming news stories of the week. Most of the time we cover the 2 biggest gaming news stories and then whatever Larry wants to talk about.
Yeah.
So Cody actually had this idea of going back and looking at the big stories we covered through the year and kind of breaking down like, hey, what were some of the biggest gaming news stories of the entire year? So what we've done is we've each curated a list of 3, and we're going to talk about them not as in depth as we would if these happened this week, but provide a little context why we think it is important. And so first of all, I'm going to say this. I went back and scoured through all 50 of our all 49 of our show notes.
Me too.
And was like, blown away by some of the shit that happened this year that I was like, wait, that was this year? Felt like it was eons ago that this thing happened. But we've covered a lot of ground this year, and a lot of big stuff has happened. So we're just going to go round robin style here. And I'm going to start with you, Larry. What is one of your biggest gaming news stories of the year?
So I ranked mine. I don't know if that's what you guys did.
I have a loose ranking.
Yeah, me too. So we'll start from the bottom and go up. Let's do
from
that.
The bottom.
Yeah.
At the end, we'll be here. Okay. My third one was Apex Legends. I don't know if y'all remember.
Poor why?
Hey, let's just acknowledge that I think at least two things were more important than this.
Well, that's very true.
But the way this game released, right? Respawn was like, "Hey, we got a new game for you." It's just out of nowhere.
Well, it was 24 hours before it, remember? People were like, we're hearing rumblings that Respawn is going to just kind of shadow drop something. And then it was like, oh, well, here it is. And it was huge.
Yeah. And there's no doubt that game was, it was big news. They certainly had some rough patches over the course of this year, figuring some things out, dealing with their community. But they broke into the battle royale space, and really they're the only game, I think, besides PUBG, the only game besides Fortnite that came out and really did well right out of the gates in this arena.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think battle royale, there are really only two big contenders right now. It's Fortnite and it's Apex. And so, what a game release!
Yeah, and it's had legs, surprising legs. I think we were worried, in the early go whether it would. And I think it obviously hasn't had the tail that Fortnite has. I don't think that's possible. But it has had surprising legs. I mean, they've kept up a steady stream of content. They release stuff every few months. And I think people are generally pleased by the stuff that they have released. Although it's taken them a while. I mean, the Battle Pass is a whole conversation we've had this year. Just figuring out what that means for that game. Not every game has figured it out as well as Fortnite has.
And I don't think Apex has necessarily figured out that aspect of their model, but I think they have figured out the chunk content that comes out, like the Halloween event, the Christmas event, the special events, despite the debacle around, the prices of the cosmetics that were involved in that. But I think from a content perspective, they figured that kind of stuff out. But yeah, I don't know what's so hard about the Battle Pass model for them to emulate and get right. It just doesn't seem very worth it to me when I look at what's available inside of it.
A lot of it, in my opinion, comes down to the way they've chosen to monetize the game. Which, I don't know how much of that's Respawn and how much of that is EA, but I just really feel like they save their best content to ask you to drop, $14 to $20 on, and I guess someone's doing it because they keep doing it.
Yeah, that's true.
But the chunk content's been great. The Halloween event is so vastly different from the Christmas event. The Christmas event, I didn't even see rumors of that. I thought they were going to do one, and it just dropped one day. And releasing a new map so quickly after the game came out, it's they've done a great job.
I also think the bigger story is not just Apex. It's been Respawn's 2019. Between Apex and Fallen Order, I mean, those are two big games to release in 1 year, two very different games to release in 1 year. It's their first, it's their entree into Battle Royale, but it was still a first-person shooter, and it reflected their skill in that arena. And then they released a third-person action game in the Star Wars universe. A first on like all of those fronts for them. And I think the game seemed to review well. Critics seemed to like it. Obviously, it wasn't a perfect game. It seemed very much like a Mass Effect 1 kind of scenario where it's like their first try at this. But Respawn just had a really great, overall had a 2019. There were definitely some low points for them in terms of some press debacles, how their developers were interacting with the community. But I think that points to a larger story this year, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
I meant to do this right at the beginning, but just to throw a few highlights of that story up. It was instantly popular to stream. It hit 10 million players in 3 days. A lot of people weren't familiar with Respawn because they've kind of been screwed over with the release of the 2 Titanfall games and where those happened and how those happened. But the release of Apex briefly bumped Titanfall 2 to the top of sales charts for a little while. And it also drove innovation in Fortnite, which is why you want to see multiple people in the same arena.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this was one of those that I was like, wait, that was this year? Like Apex is, I mean, it released in what, March, late February?
I think so. It was definitely first quarter.
Yeah, and it just has quickly become just like a staple in the gaming culture. Like it just feels like it's been a part of us for a long time, and in reality it hasn't.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Cody, what is yours?
I guess I'll lead.
Number 3.
I'll lead with I mean, we were just talking about Sekiro, and I think it was a triumph for From Software, but it sparked an interesting conversation that I think persisted not just with Sekiro but across the entire year, which was it was about difficulty in games.
Mm-hmm.
It was a flashpoint. I think Sekiro was a flashpoint for this because of the way it's designed and what its developer and the ethos behind what its fan base flocks to, the whole get good philosophy. But Sekiro's release, I think, initiated a conversation about accessibility and what difficulty actually means for a lot of people. Should there be an easy mode? Should there be multiple difficulty settings in games like this? And it quickly expanded past Sekiro, and it was something that was brought up, I think, when a number of high-profile games were launched this year. And it's one I think we talked about at the time.
Mm-hmm. One of our more spirited conversations.
Yeah, it was a great conversation. I think it's one that's still ongoing with a lot of people. I ultimately still fall down on the side that I think it's always better to have options for players. But I think Sekiro is just such a unique case where the game is solely designed around a specific vision for how you play it.
Well, I think.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think the fact that this conversation, while you say it's persisted, I don't think there has been like a flare up of this story at any point after Sekiro, right? And I think that just shows you how different game design is now than it was in maybe like even the PS2 and earlier generations, where every game was super fucking hard back in those days, pretty much. But difficulty in games is now more of an exception than a rule, at least like this unadjustable difficulty in games. You know, people like to play Halo on the hardest difficulty or Call of Duty on the insane difficulties, but there's not too many games that are just like, here is what it is. And the fact that we really only had this spirited discussion around Sekiro and it hasn't come back up, I think it's just proof of how games have changed.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It was an interesting conversation, mostly just because I think it brought up some unconscious biases in a lot of people's minds. Mm-hmm. It's true. I mean, games have gotten to the point where it's anything you can do to make someone continue to play your game. You don't want a hard stop ever. Mm-hmm. And From Software games are a series of hard stops. So I think it was. I remember it being brought up throughout the year, just in kind of like little pockets of conversation. I think as people wrote about it, but I don't know. It definitely was a massive flare up of a conversation in the industry, and a lot of developers ended up weighing in. I thought it was an interesting one to talk about because accessibility has become more and more of a talking point in the industry, whether it's size of subtitles, colorblind settings, difficulty. I think accessibility is starting to be actually talked about in the public sphere as opposed to just behind closed doors by developers.
Mm-hmm. And I think for me also that it was, there's a lot of conversation that goes on and it happens around like representation in games, and this idea of like, oh, if I'm able to see a character like me in a video game, and that was never something that I quite understood. I'm not like I don't like fervently push back against it like so much of the gaming culture does, but to me it was just I don't understand that. I'm a white dude. I've been in media for ever since the dawn of media, But with this conversation, it kind of inverses that idea, and rather than seeing yourself in the game, it's like, has the game given me something to be able to enjoy this in a way that that I can with my abilities, and it is a representation kind of idea in that the developer didn't think of, and it kind of that conversation forked in two ways. One was like people who physically are incapable of playing a game at that difficulty, and then people like me who are just too small brained to be able to actually find a game like that accessible. And to me, it just kind of brought those ideas to ground of like, I never thought of difficulty settings as a way of making a game more accessible. I thought it was just like, oh, this is default. We all think about difficulty stuff. So it was an interesting conversation, definitely for me, in a lot of multiple arenas, because I agree with you, Cody. I think options are great, and I think they're great for people who physically can't, but also for people like me who are just like, I'd love to play Bloodborne, but I'm also not going to grind my ass off trying to get good. All right, so number 3 for me is probably Twitch's terrible year. In a lot of ways, Twitch has had a good year. A lot of growth with Twitch, but there are a lot of, I think we've talked about PR debacles in a lot of different arenas in gaming this year. But I think Twitch, and you guys can help me fill in the blanks here. We're not going to go in any kind of chronological order with these stories, but we have the story of Dr. Disrespect streaming from a bathroom at E3 and getting banned, and then coming back 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later, and bringing in thousands of dollars on his return stream, making up all the money that he lost in the 2 weeks that he was suspended. We had some stuff around another streamer called Alinity, some animal abuse, some human abuse on streams. We had the artifact category getting hijacked and turned into a hardcore porn and snuff film channel, and Twitch taking all of Labor Day weekend to figure out how to respond to it, because I guess they just shut down for the weekend. They were like, we don't have anyone answering emails. But yeah, Twitch had a bad year, and then pile on top of that, competitors coming into the scene, Mixer becoming exclusive, a lot of streamers going Mixer exclusive, a couple going Facebook gaming exclusive, whatever that means. And I feel like Twitch had the short end of the stick on a lot of stories this year.
There were some people that used outright racism and broke the 3 strikes rule, and they're still on Twitch. You can probably go check them out right now. But then also, so Twitch is terrible at enforcing people breaking the law, terrible at people enforcing terrible at enforcing people using racism. But they were able to crack down on what female streamers were wearing. So priorities, I guess.
Prioritization here. Yeah. And they really, I think this year continued to function as a company who feels like they have no competition, and I'm just not sure that's the case for them anymore. I think there are viable options that exist elsewhere, and there will continue to be viable options that Mixer's not going anywhere. Microsoft's proven that they're in it for the long run. Roy Speedruns in the chat says the beard game is looking strong, boys.
For the record, when I smiled and nodded during you saying really atrocious stuff, that's what I was looking at, and I was like, "Oh man, that looks terrible on stream." Thanks, Roy.
But yeah, just a bad year for Twitch all around, and hopefully we can start to see some improvement. Not quite confident that we will.
They have added bits type things like Mixer has, so hey, they've got time to add new features. Hopefully this year they'll get to being able to stop letting people be racist and abusive on stream.
Yeah. All right, what's your number 2, Larry?
My number 2 is actually the multitude of stories about workplace conditions.
We're entering the depressing the depressing phase of this list with Twitch and this.
This was all, I mean, a lot of it is sad and depressing, but it was all really important. And I'm going to give a rundown on some of the stories we covered this year about workplace in the gaming industry, and I'm not sure if this hits all the stories that we talked about. So, fill in the gaps if I'm missing important ones. But there was the Activision layoff debacle in March. Activision had a record year in 2018, but they still missed their projections, so they laid off 800 people. So it was this terrible back-to-back story of Activision puts up record sales numbers, Activision lays off 800 people.
Mm-hmm.
We covered stories about the instability of the industry for developers because there were other companies that made layoffs. Cody brought this up one week. He talked about Amy Hennig's prediction that the industry would move toward an external contractors model. We talked about that a bit. We talked about Epic Games' work conditions and the constant crunch that they experience there. We talked about Riot Games. And am I remembering right that was an environment of like sexism, that kind of thing?
Yeah, and then
frat culture.
Yeah, and then couple that with the forced arbitration.
Yes.
We talked about Take-Two. Cody brought up one week Take-Two CEO talking about how he couldn't imagine why devs would want to unionize, but he also expects shorter gaps between releases. So that was a story one week, and
that was a baffling domino set because those were like two separate stories, right? Like it was that he said this thing, and then he's like, I don't see why they'd want to unionize.
There was the really sad news story of half of Game Informer's staff being laid off as a part of GameStop's layoffs. And one week we talked about the standard market practices of exploitation. And just how many developers kind of take advantage of how desperate a lot of people in the games industry are to have a job in that industry. And we talked a little bit about free labor and how people take advantage of, get your foot in the door by coming and essentially working for free for me. So there was just this year was a particularly tumultuous year as far as I feel like it's probably not that conditions got worse, but that people finally started standing up to those conditions, and those conditions finally started getting some of the coverage that they deserved. And we're deciding that, working people to death and burning them out for the sake of your product, it shouldn't be normalized. Yeah.
We also talked about gaming's Me Too movement, which was a lot about industry, people taking advantage of their positions of power. We talked about the gig economy and spec work in our episode with Andrew Nimsgren from Project Esports. And I think that in a lot of ways we've covered a lot of ground. Not just I'm not saying on the show, but the gaming industry has covered a lot of ground and just shedding a light on these conditions, which I think is the first step to solving them. But in a lot of other ways, it feels like there's just such a small percentage of people in the industry that actually, not in the industry like working in it, but who call themselves like fans of the gaming industry, who care about these things, that you can have. I mean, the companies you just named, Larry, are some of the biggest companies in the world: Riot, Activision, Epic. And those they continue to turn massive profits quarter after quarter, despite these things. And look, I'm just as guilty of participating in it, because I think one of the main feelings I had all year when we talked about these stories was like, well, what can I do as a consumer, as somebody who kind of orbits around the industry? What can I do to impact these things? And I think we're trying to do that by talking about it, but I feel a little powerless to do anything else.
Mm-hmm. Like, to a point, and there were some places where we did draw a hard line. I'm not going to buy this game. And in the short term, you don't hit the guys at the top. Like, they're just going to lay more people off. And that's what makes it feel powerless. Sometimes it's so bad that, you hope that it's worth it in the end, and you can stop those guys at the top and maybe get them to reconsider things. But a lot of times you feel like you're only hurting the people that are in trouble in these places with the decision not to support the work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the stuff we talked about in 2019 is some of the stuff we talked about in 2018 coming to fruition, whether it's kind of exposés of the culture of crunch, a more active conversation about unionization. I think we've talked about that several times, and this year was a huge year for unionization in the game's press, not in the industry, not in terms of developers itself. But the conversation started swirling more. The absolutely abhorrent actions of those in power, and just kind of cultures of sexism, racism, transphobia, homophobia in some of these studios started to come to light. And I think, as you said, Larry, I don't think it's the fact that this stuff, like, it's that this stuff is happening now. It's been happening forever. It's that now we are aware of it because a few brave individuals have chosen to speak up. And media outlets like Kotaku, Polygon, all of these outlets are actually starting to cover it more seriously. And it is difficult. I mean, it's difficult because it seems from the sheer amount of times we've talked about this stuff that it's not sustainable. That this industry is just a bubble waiting to pop in terms of how it treats its employees. The burnout we've been told over and over again is just excessive. It's hard to see a light at the end of the tunnel, I think, for a lot of this stuff. But a starting point is talking about it like we have been for the last year. Obviously, our audience isn't massive, but just us talking about it, us talking about it has helped. I don't want to point the lens back at me, but it's helped me think about this stuff in new ways, which is allowed me to talk to others about it in a more kind of comprehensive and more articulate way. And the fact that I think, I'm going to be honest, like, just on an anecdotal level, the sheer amount of times my dad has come to me to talk about this stuff because he's seen it in the New York Times, he's seen it in the Washington Post, I think says a lot about the visibility that these issues are getting, which is only a great place to start, I think.
Yeah.
And even though our audience is small, we have had, opportunity to at least make people think. I don't know how much we've done to convince people otherwise out of positions, but our gaming Me Too movement story in particular on YouTube, like it had quite a bit of spirited conversation. And I know for a fact the video made people comfortable and forced them to think about it, even if they didn't like what was said.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Roy Speedrun in the chat says GameStop owns Game Informer. I did not.
See, we're teaching the masses here.
By the way, I don't think we've been able to talk on the show yet, but shout out to Ben Hansen, the guys who started the Min Max show and Min Max in general. They split off and they've started a new kind of podcast, let's play, whatever you want to call it, group. You can fund them on Patreon. I would suggest doing that. They do a lot of fantastic work.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. What's your second story, Cody?
Game streaming. I think this is a big year. We had talked about it. I think we talked about it a lot, especially around E3, and kind of throughout the year as details have come out about the next generation of consoles ostensibly being focused on game streaming. And then I think the conversation flared up the most in the past few months when Google kind of hit the ground. I won't say running.
Hit the ground.
Hit the ground. Stadia. And I think it's. Google investing in this space was huge, and I think it's their first few weeks or month has shown the difficulties of entering this space, and also the promise of what game streaming can bring to the future of this industry. I think it's just been everybody's said it. We've talked about it before. This most likely is where gaming is headed, and it is the future. It's just a matter of how you implement it, how and when implement it, I guess. But a lot of the things we're going to be talking about this year are kind of a terrible mix of a lot of things, but this is a glimpse of the future that shows a little bit of promise, I think. Even if it hasn't, this year has just kind of been the first step in the step towards that future.
I think from a personal, go ahead, Larry.
So the two things that flared it up for me was Stadia hitting the ground, but also getting the xCloud announcement far earlier than I expected. Because we've talked for a while that gaming was headed this direction. And I don't know about you guys, but I did not expect it to be this year. I didn't expect anyone to launch anything this year. I was thinking, all right, we're going that way, and it's coming with the next console. But we're getting there a lot faster than I thought we were going to get there. So it's been really surprising and also really exciting, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think I debated putting this on my list, Cody, because I think for me, there was a real personal journey I've taken around the conversation with game streaming, and that I think I was probably the highest on it of the three of us on the show. And we were all decently high on it to begin with, but I thought, like, man, game streaming, it's going to be the future. Google Stadia is going to come. It's going to be a game changer. And then as we got to the announcement, I was like, man, this is exciting. Like, it seems like the tech is there. It seems like some of the demands network wise aren't too terribly taxing, despite the fact that regardless of what we got in that space, it was going to be somewhat taxing. But then how I just cooled off as it dragged out, and I started to realize, like, oh, Stadia really doesn't have much in terms of games. They've really backed off of talking about this. One of our more another spirited YouTube conversation going on those videos, around our perception of how Stadia is, and then how I felt like we were kind of talking about that, not in a vacuum per se, but I wasn't talking about my outlook on Stadia through the lens of anybody else's outlook on Stadia. It was just how I was feeling about their very palpable taking the foot off the gas, and how that conversation seemed to snowball after we had talked about it amongst people with bigger audiences.
And you especially among us weren't trying to crap on Stadia. Like, you were excited for it.
Yeah, I'm still excited for the potential. I think streaming is awesome. I've got xCloud on my phone. I think my wife ordered me a phone clip for my controller. She's trying to be sly about it, but I think that's what it is. And so I'll be playing xCloud a lot more because you have to play with a wireless controller. So I haven't chilled on the concept of game streaming, but I don't know if we have the right players in it right now outside of Microsoft.
Yeah, and I think that's what it was, one of the few places where even if the 2019 iteration of game streaming wasn't there, I think it's one of the few spots in the industry where there is potential for growth. I think we've seen, like, especially in a year where I wouldn't say it was the best year in terms of games released. It's a kind of a gearing up year for whatever comes next.
Yeah.
And so I think in that way, game streaming is emblematic of a potential that will probably be realized in the years to come. Maybe even starting 2020, depending on what Microsoft and Sony do with their consoles. But I think it was the one area I saw in the industry of potential, not just back of my throat groaning, terrible, can this ever change kind of conversation.
And I actually just finished reading a book called This Is Marketing by Seth Godin, and I read it because I was like, I've been doing this now for like 2 years. I should probably learn what marketing is now. So read this book, and I highly recommend it if you're in marketing. It's a great book. It's all about, like, the psychology of people and how when people buy products, they're not buying products. They're buying status or a feeling that they get from having that product. But anyway, he talks a lot in the book about early adopters, and says for a lot of early adopters, it's not about the quality of the product that they're getting. It's about being an early adopter and, like, just being able to say that you're in on this thing. And I feel like that was really Google's kind of approach to it. And that's not to say that what they released is low quality. I think that there are quality issues with what they've done, but I think they just recognize, like, hey, people that are getting in on this on the ground floor just want to be in on it on the ground floor. And that's really the aim, the motivation behind getting in here, and then hoping to scale from it. But I don't know if Google's ever really proven that's the kind of company they are, like, hey, we'll scale with our audience. So it'll be interesting in 2020. That's certainly an ongoing story. And that's the other thing is all of these are ongoing stories. You know, there's not a beginning or end to all of these. There's narratives that have kind of come to a head in 2019. My second is kind of related. Just the conversation around new consoles this year, you know, with the reveal of the PS5 and Xbox Series X, conversations around those things. And I think for me, it's such an important story. First of all, just because I get jazzed for new hardware. I think that that when we talk about new hardware, we're really talking about like where is the industry as a whole going, and I get really excited about those kinds of conversations. But I think it's also important that we're having this conversation because at the beginning of the PS4 and Xbox One generation, we were having conversations about not having another generation of consoles, and I think we're at a place now where gaming is more popular than ever. Console gaming is more popular than ever. It's stronger. The industry from a financials perspective is stronger than ever. And here we are going into 2020, getting excited about the same two players in the industry at the beginning of this generation releasing much anticipated hardware in the next year.
And it feels good because as of right now, there's stuff to be excited about with both of those players.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, entering the last generation, we got to a point where a lot of people were more angry and frustrated toward Microsoft than excited. And it's always good when more than one person is doing well in a particular area because, again, competition drives both people to be the best they can be.
Yeah, I think there's personally this I feel like I've had more question marks about what the next generation is than I have at other times. I think that it's always the case that there's a lot of uncertainty leading into a new generation. But I was talking with a friend of mine after the Game Awards. We were talking about Sony just because Microsoft kind of had the last word during the Game Awards. We were talking about like we know there are these 15 Microsoft studios that are working on stuff. Obviously, they announced Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2. So we know that's coming. It'll probably be sometime the year after the console launches, but we were talking about like what does Sony have in terms of a launch lineup, or like even what is it working on? Because we probably know Horizon 2 Zero Dawn 2 is on the horizon. Pun very much intended. But we don't know when that's going to come. We know there's probably another God of War in the works, but we don't know when that's going to come. And so I think this is the period of time where like our imaginations can run the most wild before E3 next year, when some of the stuff becomes a little bit clearer. Before next fall, when we actually have the consoles and their launch lineups in our hands. And so I think this is actually the best time for me because I can actually we have all these big ideas about what the next generation is going to be, and it hasn't actually been made concrete yet.
Roy Speedrun says in the chat, as someone who hasn't really paid attention to consoles in near a decade, I gotta say, this hardware legit step up. The specs on these things, they aren't messing around.
No, they aren't. I think they're becoming more like PCs, as we said earlier.
And the companies have just gotten a lot smarter about crafting their messages. And it's that feedback loop, right? Like even at the beginning of the PS4, Xbox One generation, it wasn't as engaged a feedback loop as we have now. Like social media was obviously a big thing still then, but I feel like now there's a lot more. The companies are smarter about how they intake the feedback that they're receiving from their audiences, and then distill that back out into their decisions. And so I'm excited because I feel like both Sony and Microsoft are really listening to their core bases and trying to make consoles that appeal to them. And I think Xbox is being a little more innovative with some of the things they're wanting to do, whereas I think Sony has kind of said, hey, what our audience wants is what we've been doing, something that's just solely focused on games, giving great exclusive experiences. We don't want to really fuss around these kind of outside ideas, and so it's definitely going to be interesting.
And Nintendo's doing their thing.
I know the Switch Lite was another piece of new hardware that like was pretty hype. People got excited about it.
The Switch has had a low-key, pretty incredible year, and I feel like that's Nintendo's thing now with the Switch. They like, because of the nature of it, they just like do their little Nintendo Treehouse events. They release their games. All these new games come to Switch, and it's just like another reason to buy the console and to continue playing the Switch.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of under the radar. It's never like, I feel like outside of maybe Breath of the Wild 2, there hasn't been like a get hyped moment for Nintendo this year. It's just been kind of a subtle series of like steps and moments of like, oh, now I can get this on Switch. It's another reason for me to continue playing Nintendo console. I mean, Smash was obviously their big story this year, but Nintendo just had a low-key awesome year between like Fire Emblem, Three Houses,
Marvel Ultimate Alliance. That was
Ultimate Alliance.
A lot of people.
Apparently we didn't know that.
One of us was excited.
That's true.
I did think I was going to be the only one.
Yeah. But like The Witcher 3 coming to Switch, that was big. I think Nintendo's just had kind of a low-key awesome year.
Yeah. Roy Speedrun says, I hope for a world where gamers aren't separated by their choice of hardware, but rather their choice of control scheme. Make everything crossplay and separate players based on keyboard versus gamepad. And and I think that's certainly the direction that we're going. Yeah. I think this isn't included in our big stories, but Modern Warfare being cross-platform, I think, is massive. And Sony folding on the Fortnite thing earlier in the year was kind of the gateway into those decisions.
Crossplay could definitely have made it onto any of our lists, but I think that's going to be something massive next year.
Mm-hmm. All right, Larry, what was your number one biggest gaming news story of the year of our Lord 2019?
I'm glad you worded it that way because in true me fashion, it's not a news story per se.
Well, back in 2010.
But
Fallout 76.
Mine was actually an article that I've referenced several times this year, and that's why I picked it as my number one because this article, like, I didn't realize how long ago I read it. It was actually from January. So it's one of the first stories I talked about this year.
I thought this was like middle of the year.
Yeah, because I brought it up as recently as last week, right? But this article just stuck with me. It's called Overwatch. It's on Kotaku, and it's called "Overwatch is no longer my third place" by Cecilia D'Anastasio. And I love this article, man. And it's not news. It's just she's just reflecting on how the gaming landscape has changed. And she starts the article off talking about how when she stopped playing Halo 2, stopped playing Halo 3, like nobody asked, like, where are you? Where have you been? Like, that's not how it was. A new game came out. They all moved on to play the new game. But now you have these games that persist. And so Overwatch, you step away from it a while, and when you come back, it's a completely new place. And she keeps comparing it to like a restaurant or a cafe. And so you leave for a while, and now there's a patio, and there's string lights across, and like they've added all this stuff. And it's cool, it's great, but it's not your place anymore. And she ends the article saying, quote, "If games are to be both places and continuously appealing commodities, there will always be the risk that at some point they will become too molten to call home," end quote. And the article resonated with me just because that's how games feel now. They are these places that exist, and you visit them, you hang out at them, they change, and sometimes you don't really fit in the place anymore. But I included it as my top story because although it wasn't like she was breaking news, she did do a great job of capturing a significant shift that really happened in the gaming landscape and really solidified this year. It's like the places that she talks about. It didn't all change at once. It changed so slowly we didn't really realize it. Mm-hmm. But there will never be a going back to play Overwatch or going back to play Apex, because what will that even mean? It's not like It's not like gaming is totally different now,
Yeah.
for better or for worse.
Yeah, it's not like a book where, hey, the page 8 is the same this year as it was 10 years ago. But I think the comparison to a restaurant is interesting, right? Because restaurants are staples of our lives, you know, like there are franchised restaurants that you've eaten at since you were a kid. And it's like the menu at Taco Bell is totally different now than it was when I was a kid. The aesthetic of Taco Bell is looping back to how it was when I was a kid. But, you know, like we talk all the time about you're like you said, you're never able to go back and play Overwatch the way that it was. But that's almost everything in life outside of these other kind of forms of media that we compare gaming to, books and television shows. Like everything else in life changes as we move along, and I think that we pine sometimes and like with nostalgia for those things, but I don't think that we are saddened by the fact that things are ever evolving.
I think we can be, though. I mean, I think of small towns, especially the small town I grew up in.
Boston.
There are things that
I'm just
there are things that you just take for granted are constants in places like that, because they're not. I mean, Sharon, where I grew up in, is not Boston. Sharon fundamentally hasn't changed since I moved there when I was like 4 or 5. But the small things that have changed are so notable because of that constancy, I guess. I can never we'll never get back that restaurant from my childhood that was in the center of town. That's just not coming back, and now I have to adapt to that. I do think there are ways that I think I also loved that piece because it talks about games in a way that they are different than other media, at least the games many of us have been playing this year. I feel like writing about games and the perception of them outside of the industry has always been about like these virtual places you lose hours and hours of your time in, and you do live in these places to a certain extent. And like you said, Luke, it's not so different than the rest of our lives in that these things do change, but because we've spent so much time in them and we have sort of an expectation that they are like a second place, like that game, there was Second Life. I think it was memed in The Office, but
it was.
Sorry.
That's a great episode. But like these places are second homes or third homes if depending on how many games you're playing, and the small things that do change in them make a difference. And something can be lost, I think, in that. Like Overwatch, I'm not going to play Overwatch ever again for a number of reasons that we'll talk about later, but my memories of that game are so vivid. The first summer I started playing it with you guys and with my brother, that version of the game doesn't exist anymore, much like the restaurant in the center of my hometown doesn't exist anymore. And I think there is, I won't say I'm worried or sad about it. I think that would probably be an overstatement, but it does have kind of like a sobering, it's sobering. It makes me think about these places as a little bit more connected to my life than I think a lot of other media are, just by virtue of the way and like consistent basis I interact with it.
Yeah.
Roy Speedrun says, he says multiplayer games these days feel like you're just trying to find your home. Gaming has become such a personal and normalized experience for so many people that we're not as compelled to hop on every new game that we're not as compelled to hop on every new game that drops. We'd rather hop into that familiar space where you feel like you kind of belong. And I think to his point, and this is the kind of the other half, the other side of the coin of what you're talking about, is it's not just about the games changing, but it's about the groups of people in these games that you play with that changes. And I think about the way our group that played Overwatch evolved over time, and the group that we play Apex with evolves over time, and like the feeling I have playing League of Legends or Teamfight Tactics, where we joke and meme about the fact that I'm a PC nerd now, but like it is difficult for me to get excited about playing those games in the same way I got excited about playing with Overwatch, because I don't have that same group of people that I play with. I play with my brother-in-law. I love playing with my brother-in-law, but I miss that core group of friends that I have on console that played. It's definitely unique.
Yeah.
Yeah, the restaurant analogy is apt for that reason as well. The clientele changes. Grandpa goes to McDonald's at 6 a.m. every morning, not because he really loves the biscuits. It's because of who he's going to see there.
Yeah.
And my group that I played Destiny with, there was a group of us, and we stopped getting on Destiny, and it just, for me, that's why I was playing that game. Why would I go back?
Yeah.
And then the other way that I think the comparison is the reason for the change. The restaurant changes and adapts because of what the clientele wants, what they think is going to bring more people in, what they think is going to keep people coming back. And for some people it works, and for some people it doesn't. I used to slam Pizza Hut all the time, as in like slam their food into my face, not like bash the restaurant.
Not getting on Twitter.
And then they got rid of the Pizza Mia's favorite thing in the world, and so I just don't eat as much Pizza Hut anymore.
And the lunch buffet. Come on, Pizza Hut.
Oh man, I forgot that even exists.
Dude, the $5 lunch buffet, you'd go in and just gorge yourself on pizza till you couldn't move.
Yep. But this was by far my favorite article of the year, and it came out
yeah.
Because I think that Cecilia D'Anastasio just completely accurately captured something that I think we were all feeling, but I, for one, struggled to articulate or put my finger on exactly how to describe what was different.
Royce Peterson says, I did that at Double Dave's on Monday. I'm looking up what the fuck that is. And it was a pizza joint that we do not have on this coast. But yeah, looks awesome. All right. Cody, what is your number one news story of 2019?
Mine was Epic, and specifically Epic's, I guess the thing that they've gotten the most attention for, which is kind of the ongoing exclusivity deals they've signed over the past year or two at the Epic Store. Did the Epic Store launch at the beginning of this year or the end of last year? I think it was the end of last year, because I remember a bunch of Epic Store announcements coming on the Game Awards, I think it was.
December 6th, 2018, the year of our Lord.
Okay, so what? Yeah, it was the end of last year. And I think looking back on the Game Awards last year, it was probably a bellwether for the way things were going to go this year. I think we just didn't pay enough attention to it. I guess is probably a better way to say it. Like the first one that I noticed, and it was the one that's actually hit me the hardest, was the Hades. I think the Supergiant game that was an Epic Store exclusive, and I'm like, oh, that's a shame. I'd love to see it come to console. And I think it still will, but like that was the major one. I'm like, oh, this is just on the Epic Store. That's it. That it's not gonna pop up on Steam. It's a huge loss for Supergiant. But I think that was probably a moment. The Game Awards were probably a moment we didn't pay enough attention to, and I think that blew up in everybody's faces over the course of the last year. I guess to summarize it, the whole situation around the Epic Game Store and finding exclusive deals with the big ones, I think the most notable ones were Metro Exodus, which had an agreement with Valve and Steam, and then a few weeks later ended up announcing an exclusivity deal with Epic. Turns out that didn't go over well with a lot of people.
But why?
But I think even other companies that just signed exclusivity deals with Epic had a hard time. So Gearbox, which had Borderlands 3 come exclusively to the Epic Store. The saddest one was the two-person development team behind Ooblets. And I say saddest because in a lot of ways the situation around the Epic Game Store is I guess the crossroads of a lot of things we've been talking about this year. So not only the launch of Epic, the Epic Game Store and their success with that platform, but the growing sense of entitlement, which is a term that I think a lot of gamers don't like, but is the only term to talk about this in.
Mm-hmm.
The growing sense of entitlement within a certain segment of the gaming population that they're owed something from the developers who are making their games, in combination with then a growing hostility with the people who make those games when their needs are not met 100%.
Mm-hmm.
It's like all of that kind of came together in a lot of these announcements. I mean, Metro Exodus was a notable one. It was kind of kicked it off in the early segment of the year, but like review bombs hit pretty much every one of these major games that made an exclusivity deal with Epic. And there was a lot of back and forth between Epic and a lot of these gamers. A lot of unfortunate things were said by those high up in Epic. Calling people too stupid to understand how good the Epic Game Store is for them is probably not a great way to sell your platform to the people you need to convince.
That's how I convince people to join my side of things.
Look, you stupid idiots. Agree with me.
So I feel like this is such a major story to me, at least. I think it was, largely speaking, as well, because it was the confluence. That was the word I was looking for. It was the confluence of a lot of things going on in the industry this year.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it is new platforms popping up, whether it is growing toxicity or currently existing toxicity in the games industry, and just ongoing breaking down relationships between gamers and the people who make their games.
Yeah, there were two things that really kind of stuck in my craw about this whole story throughout the year. The first was that so many people were upset, but I don't feel like anyone at any point in the year 2019 put into words why they were upset about some of the Epic stuff. Like, nobody was able to formulate a real justified argument outside of the one instance of the game that was available on a platform and then taken off of the platform. But nobody, like, from a concept perspective, could tell me why having to download another game launcher was a disastrous thing and inconvenience for their life.
It's a free platform.
Exactly. Like, getting angry about console exclusives makes a little more sense to me because it's then behind a $300-$400 paywall, right?
Yeah.
But and then how that conversation around the anger overshadowed, I think, some of the actual productive conversation that Epic was trying to have around revenue share and with their 12%. I can't remember the numbers straight off the top of my head, but Epic doesn't take as much from the game sales as Steam does, and how Tim Sweeney came out and said, we'll stop with the exclusive stuff if Steam agrees to match our revenue share with these developers. And I felt like that was a productive conversation that was being overshadowed by the baby raging that made absolutely no sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just feel like we've talked several times this year about toxicity in fandom and why we think, and we've also talked several times this year about blind corporate loyalty.
Yeah.
And I think these two things are intrinsically tied in this particular case and a lot of the cases we talked about this year. Like, I mean, we how many times this year have we talked about how absolutely terrible Valve is in terms of how they run their platform? How many times have we talked about how irresponsibly they've run their platform?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those times, people who are upset about having to download another app on their computer to buy games that they would buy on Steam are supporting this platform that they would be trashing under any other circumstance. It's just like, it's mind-blowing to me that a lot of people, as you said, Luke, can't articulate why they abhor the idea of a second platform so much beyond the fact that they have to like press a few extra keys on their keyboard to download it.
And because I hate Fortnite.
And because, well, that's a large part of it too, I think.
I wasn't saying that as a joke. I think that is.
It is. Which in and of itself is kind of, I mean, it's just hating on the most ubiquitous game in the world, which doesn't really incentivize.
Oh, look at you. You're so edgy.
I just, this year has just been so disheartening on so many levels. And I think a lot of those things came together in a lot of these deals. And the worst was the Ooblets thing.
Yeah.
There's a 2-person design team that ended up, they brought their game to the Epic Store. And I think there were a lot of marketing and PR mistakes that were made along the way, as was the case a lot of times with Epic this year. But it just resulted in all this hate coming their way, and they don't have the bandwidth to deal with it.
They were the team that's like, we did this because going to Epic gives us financial stability to be able to release this game without having to worry if we're going to be able to put food on our table. Yeah,
which has been a huge draw for Epic's platform.
Yeah. And it's been the messaging behind the exclusive decisions they're making on their end as well, that they want to be a partner for these developers. And again, those points of conversation being completely overshadowed by the rage.
Blind baby rage.
Blind baby rage.
Yeah. It's just it seems like there's increasingly, unfortunately, a disconnect between like what people want, which is just easy access and kind of something that coincides with what's already in their ecosystem and what's good for developers. We talked about this earlier in the show, but the conflict between people wanting the game they want and what's good for the developers seems to be more and more of a talking point, and unfortunately it kind of came to light a lot in terms of what Epic was doing.
Mm-hmm. All right, my number one story, and I will argue that this is not just my number one story. I really do think that this is probably the number one story of 2019, and that is the Blizzard and Hong Kong debacle. And not to relitigate the entire thing, high level overview. There's some civil disrest and civil unrest in Hong Kong for some very legitimate reasons. And a popular Hearthstone pro, after competing in an official Blizzard tournament, said something about those demonstrations and was banned from competing for a year, and all of his earnings from that tournament were taken away. The casters who interviewed him at the time that he made the statement were they were basically just fired, right, at the time. And then Blizzard, there was this huge backlash. People decided they were going to boycott Blizzard. They were going into all kinds of official Blizzard streams and saying "Free Hong Kong," you know. And it took Blizzard the better part of a week to respond, and when they responded, made nothing better. They reduced the suspension of Blitzchung to 6 months, and I think they reinstated his earnings as well. And then also said that the casters would only be suspended for 6 months as well. And thought, okay, well, we fixed that. Great job, guys. Let's move on. Well, nobody was happy with that response either, because they didn't recognize why what they did received the backlash. And then they got up during BlizzCon this year and were basically like, hey, we're really sorry we handled it that way. We're not going to change anything about how we handled it. Just want to let you know we're sorry about it. And this is the final word of the Lord. And we will now move on to our BlizzCon 2019 in one of the weirdest apologies I've ever watched. I have never seen, and I don't think I'm overstating this, I don't think I have ever seen a more visceral and kind of unified response from people that I did when people were pissed off at Blizzard after this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And how wide-reaching the response was.
Oh yeah, being
There were
covered
members of
by
Congress
yeah, politicians
I forgot
on
about
both
that.
sides of the aisle. It was the only unifying issue in Congress.
in 2019. Yeah,
For the last 3 years, probably.
Yeah, probably.
yeah. So
Yeah, this thing just didn't stop.
no.
Like, it just kept on snowballing the more time went on.
And the resolution was everybody just recognizing, like, oh, well, what's been said has been said, and no minds are going to be changed, so I guess we move on with our lives.
I was just checking. They are finally to a point where you can scroll through the replies on their tweets and not come across free Hong Kong stuff, but it was weeks and weeks.
The Overwatch World Cup chat. Yeah, Overwatch World Cup chat dominated by free Hong Kong. And you know, they kept coming back to that idea, like, hey, the point is that he used an official Blizzard channel to say anything political. Not that we disagreed with the message. When I think we all kind of saw it as, China doesn't really like when you, what's the word, criticize them. And that's an important market for Blizzard.
Remember, they clarified at BlizzCon it wasn't even that it was political. They don't want anything off topic. And that's even less true.
Yeah, because I've watched every single Overwatch League match, and I can tell you on multiple occasions, times where things were not related to Overwatch that were taking place on the stream. And people who did far worse things who were employed by or a part of an official Blizzard League who were not given nearly as severe a punishment. You know, thinking of like XQC and some of the things that he did during season 1, and being suspended a couple weeks, maybe a few games, not a year, and all of his earnings revoked. So
Yeah, it's odd because I mentioned earlier blind corporate loyalty. This was somehow is the flip side of it.
yeah,
This was a reckoning for Blizzard in a lot of ways. It's a reckoning for a lot of things and kind of a lot of ongoing issues people have had with Blizzard over the past few years. But I've never seen such a decisive like moment for a company that just, I mean, I don't think Blizzard's not over. Blizzard's not canceled at the end of 2019, but it was a big blow for them. They certainly haven't gotten my confidence or my loyalty back. It's gonna take a lot of work from them to do that.
yeah.
And they've told you they won't.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I think the situation itself kind of lends itself to that too, right? Like, what's going on in Hong Kong is really, it's not really there are two sides to this kind of situation. You know, it's pretty stark. The facts of it are not really debatable, and it's one of the few black and white, good and evil situations where a lot of people look at it and they're like, all right, Blizzard, you chose to side with evil. Wow.
Yeah. I can't think of of a comparable example of something like it happening, which is why, in my mind, I think all of these others, we can kind of relate it to something else that's happened. I can't think of anything like this in the gaming industry since
it was the story of 2019.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on, I do want to just point out I went through all of our show notes and just pulled out some of the big stories, and I'm just going to hit really quickly on some of the ones that we didn't talk about. Just some honorable mentions here. Bungie acquiring the rights to Destiny and breaking off from Activision and going independent was a big one.
It's huge.
EA canceling the open world Star Wars game that they had taken away from Amy Hennig to rework. They finally just killed that project off. Xbox announcing that they were going to be bringing Xbox Live to other platforms, kind of changing up the definition of crossplay and really establishing their messaging around how they view their online services. Borderlands 3 revealed and launched a super anticipated game, much anticipated. Let's see. the legal fight around loot boxes. We had a lot of conversations around loot boxes in 2019, but the U.S. had proposed legislation. The U.K. had some spirited debates in their legislative bodies as well. Other European nations with conversations around loot boxes.
And even without the laws being passed, they're still, you can see people putting their toes in the water and trying models. Yeah, definitely.
The mysterious lead up and launch of Death Stranding I don't think any of us were really expecting that in 2019, and then to get it when we got it and how we got it
and what it ended up being.
Yeah, I still don't know.
The Nintendo Switch Joy-Con drift drama that dominated headlines for about a week
and personally affected some of us.
Yeah,
True.
The Fortnite World Cup being a massive event, creating instant millionaires. The ESA leak of journalist information. Let's see. Fallout 76 launching their $100 per year subscription.
Yeah, I deliberately avoided Fallout 76. I talked about them several times this year. And the thing is, like, some of it was positive. They were moving in a positive direction, and they just can't help themselves.
Nope. So, all right. Well, those are some of our honorable mentions. Larry, I'm going to turn it over to you because you went back and looked at our 2019 predictions. And let's see how we stacked up.
Well, it was specifically our predictions about the next generation.
Oh, okay.
So in some ways we were wrong because some of these things happened before the next generation. But in some ways, we're geniuses.
Hey, can you drop that link in our Discord chat here so I don't have to click off to get to it?
Yes.
Thank you.
See. You want me to just read through these and you guys interrupt me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like we always do. We'll continue to interrupt you.
So I've got them laid out.
Yeah, that sounds great.
It's just like Oxenfree and that other after party. So I've got them laid out here in the order we went that night. Cody went first. I went second. You went third.
So let me point something out real quick, and I'm not interrupting you for the joke. Let me point out that this is not our predictions typed out from when we made the predictions. Larry went back and listened to this episode and made these notes. I did not realize that.
As I was listening, I was like, we saw some things coming, man. We're somewhat, Cody in particular was downright clairvoyant on one point. But Cody, your first prediction was neither Sony nor Microsoft will launch with a diskless version of their console, but they will roll one out eventually. Xbox will do it first. And Luke and I both disagreed with you. And so far, we don't see a diskless version coming, but
there is
Series X.
There's already
confirmed.
Well, huh? No, the Series X has a disc slot.
Okay, I just didn't even notice.
There is a diskless version of the Xbox One.
Yes.
So
that's not what I was saying.
Yeah, just putting it out there.
All right. Cody said most of Microsoft's exclusives will be a focus on single-player content based on the pedigrees of who they hired. Luke and I hesitate to agree with this, but we don't know yet. That's still another wait and see.
Yeah.
This is where Cody was clairvoyant. You said the God of War. You called it the God of War effect. Be better. That AAA publishers will reevaluate stealth franchises and invest in creativity rather than just stability. Luke pressed you on what franchise you think might do that, and you said BioShock.
Yes.
Which at the time was just wild speculation, but hey, here we go. New BioShock game coming.
And then he dropped the crystal ball. So
yeah. Fell apart real hard there.
Death Stranding will be delayed at least twice. It will be launch as a game labeled way too Kojima.
That part is true.
That part is definitely true.
Is that really a prediction though?
And you said, I don't think Sony knows what this game is, and I don't think Kojima knows what this game is. And you said that well before Kojima said that he
The latter is definitely not true, but the former I think is true.
Well, no, Kojima did at one point say he didn't know what the game was before
Oh, is
launch.
that true?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess I was right then.
I mean, we're not giving out points or anything, but I'd give you a point for that.
None of us definitely saw that game coming
Oh,
out.
no. I think we were all like, maybe 2025. It'll be a great PS6 launch title.
Yep. So my predictions, I said that Halo Infinite would be a launch title. We all agreed with that. And I'm trying to remember, did that get confirmed yet? I still think
It's in the launch. I thought they said it was going to be a launch window game because it was talked about alongside Scarlet at E3.
Okay. I said that governments will start cracking down on loot boxes and we will see them disappear and be replaced by another system. And we debate on who might do that and who might not, but I feel like we have seen governments cracking down on loot boxes for sure.
At least having enough conversations to scare the industry into making changes.
Yeah. I said there will be another foray into VR and AR. We'll see. I feel less confident about that now.
I think Xbox, that ship has sailed for Xbox. I think Phil Spencer's basically said he doesn't give a rip about it.
I said we'll see an increase in the free-to-play model like Fortnite or Smite, play for free but purchase characters or cosmetics. And that I think that is the direction that we're moving instead of loot boxes. A lot of things are doing that alongside loot boxes, but yeah. And I said cross-platform is just going to be the way that it is. And Luke in that segment, he said that he had thought about making one of his predictions that Xbox was going to come out and say they support crossplay for anyone willing to right out of the gate. And Xbox actually did take that stance this year. And the Luke's predictions were The Last of Us Part 2 Remaster will be a launch title. We'll see. But the window is...
It's not.
It's not. Yeah, it's launching in May.
Yeah.
Oh. Well.
Oh, well, I mean, will there be a remastered version of it for the PS5? I guess we don't know. It'd be weird for them to remaster a game that was 5 months old, but stranger things have happened.
You said Xbox will finally get rid of replaceable controller batteries and use chargeable batteries, wireless charging. Don't know yet. I don't think we got the specs on that controller, just an image, right?
No.
Right.
Yeah. You said PS5 will be fully backwards compatible for first-party titles. It's another we'll wait and see. There are 3 rumored Xboxes, and this was just kind of summarizing what we knew at the time, but then the prediction that you made was that Xbox Anaconda would be a PC Lite with upgradable parts, and eventually it would be the only non-streaming model available. It's just going to become PC Lite. They're going to increasingly blur the line console and PC. And we still feel like they might be going that way, but we don't know yet. And you also said the Xbox One 2 will come with a full feature creator studio exclusively linked to Mixer.
I still think that this could be possible.
I do too.
All
of yours were very like
Xbox One 2. All of mine were what?
All of yours kind of fall in the category of we'll wait and see.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, the one that caught me though was when Cody was like, "Yeah, I know it's got like." We were even like, "Yeah, it's kind of a long shot." And Cody's like, "Yeah, it's a long shot, but BioShock, I could see BioShock doing this."
Well, we've yet to
dreams.
Yeah, we've yet to really see what BioShock will be. I don't know if it'll be as big of a deviation as God of War was from its original formula, but yeah,
that's true.
All right, great 2019, guys. It's been a fantastic year.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground, talked about a lot of things. I feel like we're maybe a little smarter than we were when we came into this thing.
Just a little.
Just a little. So, well, let's wrap this show up, Cody, with the weird news of the week. What are you bringing to the table here? I have not looked at this story yet. So
Perfect.
Awesome.
This is the story of the Great Crab Rave. There's an Easter egg in Battlefield 5. Battlefield games are actually, the recent ones at least, are really known for their in-depth Easter eggs. And there's a new one. Classic Battlefield map called Wake Island has come to Battlefield 5 as they've expanded their map set to cover the Pacific Theater. And on this map are a bunch of crabs. You can look at these crabs. Most of them scurry away. Some of them don't. The ones that don't seem to congregate around this pedestal, this monument in the map that is a monument to like all the players who have committed their time to Battlefield 5. Pretty standard stuff. Apparently, if you go to this spot, you can tune to a radio station that allows you to hear Morse code. People who have dedicated their enough time to decoding that message, it basically reveals a string of numbers and letters that point to coordinates on the Wake Island map that you're on. If you go to those locations, you can kind of discover these vinyl records that play all these old school renditions of Battlefield themes. If you collect all of them, or if you collect a certain amount, a remix of the classic Battlefield theme plays in the style of a steel drum band, like a Caribbean steel drum band. And when that happens, the crabs at the pedestal start dancing in a rave. Some of them dab. And fireworks go off, and just all this stuff, all this shit starts happening. There's a video in the Kotaku article about this that was written by Heather Alexandria. It was actually released today. I just saw this on Kotaku today. I thought it was hilarious. But it's one of those things like Battlefield and DICE are like low-key really good at making Easter eggs in their games. And there's just like, this is just the latest example of the kind of ridiculous lengths they'll go to reward their players if they spend enough time in their games. It's just like a bonkers thing to find in a World War II shooter. But it's hilarious. And I love stuff like this. I think it's pretty clever, and hats off to the people who actually took the time to find this.
I will say how unrealistic, because the World War II happened in the early 1900s, right? 1940s. And the dab was invented and popularized in 2014. So
little do you know, it has its roots in
crab culture.
Early crab culture, specific crab culture.
I'll add it to the Wikipedia page.
Please.
It's not the first dance that Fortnite has stolen.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's awesome. I love little Easter eggs like that. I'm always just blown away by the people who pay enough attention to figure that shit out.
I know. Because
I wouldn't think twice about it.
Nope.
All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for us in 2019. And I will part by saying this. We thank you guys for tuning in, listening, downloading the show, leaving comments, reviews, all that sort of stuff. And I'm not just saying that to plug you to do it later, but for anybody who's given any of their time to engage with our content over the last year, we greatly appreciate it. I'm excited as we move into 2019. We'll have a new look when we come back. We're going to have conversations at the start of the year around some changes to our structure, some new segments being added in. And so if you have any thoughts, ideas, you can email me, Luke at playerversusall.com. Your thoughts, ideas. You can join our Discord at the link in the description, or !Discord in the chat. Love to hear what you guys want to listen to. We want the hour and a half you spend with us each week to be something you get excited for, and so however we can do that, let us know. And also to my co-host, thank you guys. It's been an awesome year, fun year, 50 episodes of gaming content. It's been a blast. You guys put a lot of work into what you do. I appreciate the level of thought in the conversations that we have. I think that's something that sets us apart from other shows, and I appreciate you giving your time to do this. So
we appreciate you, our fearless leader.
I love you too.
So we're gonna get out of here now, like we always get out of here. Let's go around the circle. Who are you? Where can people find you? What are you going to be tweeting about this week, Larry?
I'm Larry. You can find me on Twitter at StillInFlux, and I will be tweeting about this little film coming out this week called The Rise of Skywalker. It looks like something I'd be interested in. I'm going to check it out tomorrow.
All right.
It's already a fucking hellscape on Twitter because of that movie.
Yep, the reviews are not looking great.
All right. Cod Tonston.
Ooh. My name is Cod Tonston. Coddington, if you will. You can find me on Twitter at ProElectioneer, and I'm probably not going to be tweeting much leading into next week, mostly just because this week has been nuts at work. But next week, hopefully going to be tweeting about some Jedi Fallen Order when I get my hands on it. That's going to be my Star Wars dose this holiday season. I'm probably not going to go see Rise of Skywalker, to be honest.
I will. I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, but my wife and I have a little tradition where we go, and then we'll take her aunt a few days later, so we always see it twice in theaters, which for me, you know, I never do. I hardly go see movies once in theaters.
Sometimes I lie to Luke about whether I've seen it, so he'll watch it with me.
Oh, I've done that before to my friends.
Do you have friends like that too, who won't watch something with somebody who they know watch it?
My ex was like that.
Yeah, I can't do it. Larry's lied to me on multiple occasions.
Yeah.
So
more than that, he just doesn't know it.
Pourquoi? My name is Luke Croft. You can find me on Twitter at LukePVA. And I'm probably just going to be tweeting more about these $105 active gaming footwear shoes that Puma's put out for their gamers. They're designed.
Description of the features.
I'm trying to find it.
I haven't seen this.
Oh shit. Okay, hold on. Let me pull it up. Let me go to my Twitter because I tweeted a picture of them.
Let me go to your Twitter.
Ninja also released some Adidas shoes. So let's see, profile. All right, I'm gonna read you the product description here. Created with console gamers in mind, so fuck you, PC players. The gaming sock is the first edition active gaming footwear designed for indoor and in-arena use. It delivers seamless comfort, support, and grip so gamers can adapt to different active gaming modes and game their best. Features and benefits include medial wrap-up grip in seek mode, lateral wrap-up support in attack mode, and heel wrap-up stability in cruise and defense mode. I don't even know what those 20 words fucking mean.
Do the shoes shift? Do they change? I can't tell you how many times I've been gaming and I'm sitting in my chair, I'm like, man, I hope I don't slip right now.
I just love how it's for indoor or in arena use. It's like,
I mean, they're clearly trying to get into the esports arena,
but
this is not something that's needed.
I guess everything that is in arena is indoors, but not everything that is indoors is in arena.
Yes, we're rectangular situation.
I'll probably just keep trying to make sense of this and tweet through my thought process of thinking about these $105 gaming socks.
$180 shoes.
$180 gaming socks.
Sir, these are $180.
I'm an advocate of barefoot gaming. I think that it's better for the legs.
Yeah, very weird. All right, let's get out of here.
Speedrun has some thoughts on this.
Oh, does he? Oh, yeah. Ninja also announced some shoes. I think they're really fucking expensive too, but they're from Adidas. And then he says, Jesus, he couldn't have made something cool. I'd never buy my kids those things. They are like his bright ass blue, bright ass yellow. They have the word ninja on them. Like, I don't know. I can't wear a pair of shoes with another man's name on them. That's just a rule I have. It's a rule I have, guys.
Like, they're his shoes.
I look down, I'm like, wait, who? Can't wear Jordans either.
Whose are these? Who am I?
Can't wear Jordans.
All right, guys. Again, appreciate you guys. Appreciate all of you. We'll be back. See you next year. Hope you guys have very happy holidays and Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and we'll see you guys on January 1st. All right, drinking champagne from a paper tube out of the Xbox box. Let's go, dudes. All right, we love you. Goodbye.
Why, that's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
The definition of insanity.
Would you kindly pick up that shortwave radio?